Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones! Let me ask you something. Did you all enjoy listening to me talk about my favorite video game of all time, Legend of Mana, not once, but twice? Well, then have I got some good news for you. Because I've got even more to talk about thanks to the latest entry in the franchise, the mobile title, Echoes of Mana. Echoes of Mana was first announced on June 27th, 2021 during a 30th anniversary stream event for the franchise, and was basically revealed to be another instance of a popular series going gacha, naturally with characters across the entire series of Mana. Asterisk. Echoes of Mana was developed by Right Flyer Studios and published by Square Enix. The game was eventually released on April 27th, 2022, and it was admittedly a little bare bones at first, with only a handful of worthwhile units, a couple of story chapters, and minimal side content. The plot wasn't really anything all that special. You play as either Quilto or Quilta, I picked Quilta, and are asked by the Mana Goddess to travel to different worlds, or echoes, and recover the fabled Mana Sword. Most chapters either took you to a specific series of Mana World to interact with characters from that game, or more often, to different locations in your world, to deal with Echoes of Mana specific characters, like Duffel and Honeycomb, or the sexy scorpion babe, Raxus. Or Madame Moti, who is a staple of the series, but isn't normally a total hottie like this. Oh yeah, and there's also a sheep mascot named Bashir, who I mainly remember because his one scream made me laugh every single time. Things were actually going pretty well, and the game eventually picked up a bit more steam, with regular events, new recruitable units, and more story. Until a few months ago. See, on February 13th, 2023, less than a year after the game launched, players logging on to get their daily rewards were met with an end-of-app service announcement, saying that the game would be shutting down in a few months on May 15th, 2023. That's right, as of the day this video is going up, Echoes of Mana officially shut down service yesterday, barely a year after launch. This came as a pretty big surprise to players. Heck, it probably came as something of a surprise to the devs as well, because they clearly had more stuff in mind for this title. As of the game shutting down, one of the main characters of Children of Mana never even made it into the game, and there was never a single playable unit from Heroes of Mana or Sword of Mana. Which is weird, because that Children of Mana character and the Heroes of Mana protagonist were in the game's opening cinematic. But hey, we did get a few Rise of Mana characters, and we never even got that game over here. But the truth is, I'm making this video with one very specific goal in mind. While the game is gone, there was a surprisingly high amount of Legend of Mana specific content spread throughout the past year. And so today, in both celebration and memoriam for this simple gacha game, I'd like to go over all of the Legend of Mana content in Echoes of Mana. I'm going to break this video up into 4 distinct sections. I'll be going over the playable units, the memory gems, the main story, and finally the side events. Also, just to clarify, I am going to be talking about stuff in this video as if everyone watching it is already relatively familiar with Legend of Mana, and that means I am going to get into some spoiler stuff, so I guess consider this a warning for that. Alright, so let's start off with the bread and butter of any gacha game, the playable units. Every unit in this game has a unique title and specializes in a certain element and weapon type. So let's start things off and take a look at our main protagonists, who, by the way, thanks to this game, now have official canonical game names, and not those dumb, stupid, silly, goofy manga names we were stuck with for years. Yep, now we have Shiloh and Seraphina. As protagonists, they naturally have a couple of different unit options to choose from. Shiloh has a 3-star Wisp Axe unit called Weaver of Fantasies, and the 4-star Shade Sword Encounter Sprung from a Seed. Full disclosure, this was one of my first good units in this game, and he's fantastic. This unit was a mainstay in my party through the entire game. Honestly, a lot of the battle footage you're going to see in this video is going to have this guy in it. And then there's also one more, and that's the 4-star Undine Glove Afloat with Hope Shiloh. You may notice his outfit is a bit different, and I'll get into that later. Then there's Seraphina, who had two 3-star units that were the Guided by Calling Dreams Undine Spear and the A Sprouting Encounter Gnome Bow. She also had two 4-star units, the A World of Encounter Shade Knife and the Distant Dawn Dreamer Salamander Bow. Next up is the money-grubbing merchant Niccolo, and he was in the game from the very start as a Jin Glove user named Smile for Mew. Niccolo is actually the only Legend of Mana character who was in the game from the very start that never got a 4-star unit, so this is actually his only appearance. Pretty early into the game, we got an event that gave us a 3-star Wisp Sword Young Jumi Knight Elazul, and then a banner sometime later gave us the much cooler looking Significant Pursuit Dryad Sword Elazul as a 4-star unit. Dryad characters were pretty rare in this game for a while, so this was actually a really good addition at the time. Both times we got an Elazul, we also got a 4-star Lady Black Pearl to go alongside him. First, there was the Wisp Axe Jumi's Finest, and the Dark Core Shatter Dryad Axe. And fun fact about this one, I almost didn't get her. Luck was just not on my side with gacha pulls here, and I was only able to get her before the game shut down because I'd done enough harvest to get the points for the pity pull. Now this next unit is one I was really excited about. We actually got Sandra as a playable 4-star character. She's an Undine Glove wielder, simply referred to as the Jewel Hunter, so she's the only Legend of Mana unit that wasn't playable in some way in her original game. And yeah, it made me really happy to see her. She was a character I actually really wanted to see. However, I have a quick bone to pick with her character bio in this game. Known for her alluring looks and daring acts of thievery, she goes out of her way to ensure that victims come to no harm. Did the devs play Legend of Mana? Because she kills a lot of people. Look, I agree that Sandra is hot, but I am not gonna let them gaslight me into believing that she's some anti-murder thief who does this for funsies. Heck, in the main story of Echoes of Mana, you actually encounter Rubens and Esmeralda in the underworld who are only ever there in Legend because Sandra killed them. Speaking of the underworld, we've naturally got the Conqueror, Lark, as an Undine Axe user, and you can't have Lark without his gorgeous sister, Sierra. Sierra is actually the only 2-star Legend of Mana unit, which is why she doesn't get a title and is just Sierra, an Undine knife wielder. But she also has a 3-star unit, Proud Dragoon, which is a Wisp knife wielder, and a 4-star unit that is once again an Undine knife wielder called Unyielding Loyalty. This unit stuck out to me because this game had all Japanese voice acting, and whenever she used her super move, I always thought she was saying, "Did you say something?" But yeah, there are actually 3 Sierras, making her the most used Legend character outside of the 2 protagonists. Oh yeah, and we also had Escad as the Butt Holder of Justice with a Jin sword. I don't like Escad, but I did say I was going to talk about everything. And lastly is a character that I really wanted to show up, but wasn't necessarily expecting to see. The Dryad magic user, Ellie of Efflorescent Wings. Ellie is actually one of my favorite party members in Legend of Mana. I know when I was recording footage for my previous videos, I got a lot of footage of her. Turns out, there's a really good reason why she's in this game that I am really excited to talk about when I get to the events section. And that's actually it, and Legend of Mana fans may find themselves thinking that a couple of notable names were absent from this section. And yes, I do think I should take a moment to discuss them as well. As far as playable units go, I do think it's a little strange that we got Escad and 3 different Sierras, but not a single Diana. I definitely would have liked to have gotten the cute cat girl. Also, like, come on, where were Bud and Lisa? You use teams of 3 in this game. I'd have had Shiloh or Seraphina traveling with my awesome apprentices as much as humanly possible. Even if they'd just been 2-star units, I'd much rather have seen them instead of Billy and Bobby, or whatever those 2 identical dinks from Trials of Mana were called. And just to cover my bases, with technically playable characters, I will note we didn't have Pearl or Esmeralda as units in this game. On one hand, those 2 characters don't really fight, but I still think they could have made a good kit for them as more support-based units. One last character I want to mention that I do think should have been in this game stems from how Echoes of Mana actually had a lot of natural 5-star units that were mostly powerful antagonist characters from the franchise. I think Erwin would have been a great choice for this. We already got Sandra, so I think the Demon Lord would have been a really good addition to this game. Alright, so that is it for playable units. Now we are going to move on to Memory Gems. These were basically badges that you could put on characters to raise their stats and provide passive abilities, like boosting specific elemental damage or recovering MP while field inactive. The main thing that you need to know about them is they were basically collectible artwork that showed off a moment or event from different games in the franchise. Earlier, I mentioned that Echoes didn't have any playable units from Sword or Heroes of Mana, but they did have a few Memory Gems, so the titles were not completely absent from this game. Now, all of the 2-star Memory Gems were typically just character art, and usually not anything too special, like, look, here's a Dudbear. For Legend of Mana, we had Tipo, Nunezak from the Academy of Magic, and the Pelican Mail Carrier, whom they just refer to as Pelican, and not by her name, Amalette. I know things, I pay attention. But the 3-star Memory Gems got more into the actual artwork and gave us some better stuff. Starting with Another Day in Domina, which basically just gives us a nice view of the first area of Domina with a Sproutling walking around. This is a nice one, but I think they could have made Domina look a bit more lively by having Miss Yuka outside her inn, or Jennifer sweeping in front of her shop. A Poetic Voice is a really nice one with Ellie, Flamshi, and Gilbert, as he probably attempts to woo them through song in the Birdcage Lighthouse. I know Gilbert is a total yutz, but I can't lie, I'd probably want to impress them too. Which actually leads me into Dearest Friend. I'm not going to talk about this one a lot right now because this Memory Gem was connected to an event that I am really excited to get to later. Next up is It's the Lil Things, which is just a nice drawing of Lil Cactus writing in his diary. It's a cute moment depicting one of the most fun and iconic side quests from Legend of Mana, and I love seeing it here. Masterful Merchant depicts the scene from the event Niccolo's Business Unusual, where he tries to sell Tipo the wheel that creates Luan Highway. I like seeing Duel and Mark in the background, and this is a fun scene from the game. Though it makes me wish Tipo's 2-star Memory Gem had been a character that doesn't get to show up in any of these other ones, like Capella and Diddle, or Watts the Blacksmith. No, not you, the other one. And lastly, from the Legend of Mana 3-star Memory Gems, we have Tree Chat, which has Seraphina out in the orchard, and this may actually be one of my favorites. It's just a gorgeous piece, and I like seeing Seraphina. She makes me happy. Now, there are a few Echoes of Mana 3-star Memory Gems that feature Legend of Mana characters, but most of those are event-related, so I'll just cover them when I go over the specific events. Which now brings us to the 4-star Memory Gems, which don't necessarily have fancier art compared to the 3-star ones, but do tend to show off some more exciting or action-packed scenes. Like starting with a hostile interrogation, which is a good moment to include as a Memory Gem, since I imagine Elazul confronting Rachel in the pub is probably one of the first major story moments that most people playing Legend of Mana happen to see. There's also Colliding Convictions, which features Lark and Sierra going head-to-head in the White Forest. Admittedly, I tend not to like these weapons clashing style art picks, but I do love the story between these two characters, and it's pretty rad seeing it in more detail like this. Finalizing Fate actually does show us Erwin, whom I mentioned earlier, and I guess Escad fighting him on top of Leucemia, but Escad, I think you're facing the wrong way. It's gonna be really hard to slash at him when you're facing that way. Then there's Knightly Duty, which depicts Elazul in the Makiv Caverns, and if it wasn't obvious from the different art style and distinct copyright tag in the description of this one, this is actually a tie-in Memory Gem for the Legend of Mana anime, The Teardrop Crystal, which I still have not seen. I should probably fix that. Missions Misaligned is an interesting gem, because this one was only available after they made the announcement that the game was being shut down, and you had to buy it through their special Story Weaver shop, which was basically just the game going, here's a bunch of stuff we clearly already finished designing and probably had events lined up for, just take it. This is actually the only appearance of Diana, and I feel like she probably would have appeared as a playable unit in whatever event where this was supposed to show up. Rulers of the World was one of the first really good Memory Gems I got when I started playing, and it's Bud and Lisa with their evil pumpkins. Great scene, great characters, good memory gem. I loved this. The Professor's Pet gives us Esmeralda, and I am super fond of that character, so I liked seeing this one. Something else I like is that this one is not actually a specific scene in Legend of Mana. I just like seeing her interact with the teachers at the academy. I feel like it fleshes things out a little bit more. The Teardrop Crystal is another anime one, with this basically just being a poster for the show. It is cool that we got to see a few Jumi characters here that were not in Echoes of Mana otherwise, but I am kind of bummed that we never get to see those characters in the game's distinct art style. And while we're on the subject of the Jumi story stuff, let's take a look at With One Left, which, God, I both love and hate this one. This scene always hurt me as a kid, but this is gorgeous artwork. This is my favorite piece. It is so good seeing Black Pearl react to the loss of Elazul's core. I love this one, hands down. This is an amazing art piece and a fantastic story moment. And you may have noticed I've been covering these alphabetically, but I am breaking that to now talk about I'm Back, which shows us the final moment of the Jumi arc where Shiloh returns home to see Bud and Lisa. I was really happy to see this moment get artwork as a memory gem. This really is just such a good moment to see. And real quick, once again, there are a couple of Echoes of Mana gems that feature Legend of Mana characters, like the Banquet of Champions, which mainly exists as a celebration of the series as a whole, and has a lot of protagonists eating together with Shiloh sitting at the table. Then there's also Seamless Synergy, which was used in a lot of promo art for the game, and has Seraphina and a few other protagonists taking down the Mantis Ant. Once again, there are a few other event-related ones, but like with the 3 stars, I will cover those when I get to them. Alright, and now that brings me to Legend of Mana's role in the main story of Echoes of Mana. Throughout Season 1, you mainly go to different Echoes to try and find the Mana Sword. The first real sign of Legend of Mana you get in Echoes comes from Chapter 5, Confronting Confusion, where Quilta goes to the Land of the Fairies. What's kind of fun here is you get to see fairy designs from basically every game in the franchise, implying that while all the games may take place in different worlds, they do share a singular fairy realm, which I think is kind of fun. But yeah, not a whole lot here, but you do get to see a couple of Legend of Mana fairies before fighting the boss. Nothing fancy. Chapter 6 of the story, In a Patchworked World, seemed like it was gonna send us to Fadiel, but truthfully you're really only there for the first few missions and a brief boss fight. Quilta encounters Elazul in the Makiv Caverns, and the two wind up looking for Pearl and fighting Duink. It's basically Echoes of Mana retelling the legend event The Lost Princess, only with a different protagonist. You get transported somewhere else after that. Speaking of being transported somewhere else, most of Chapter 8, Torment's Terminus, involves Quilta being trapped in a Shadow Realm, and basically going through a boss rush while characters you've met cheer them on. So Elazul and Pearl do share a few words of encouragement before you fight the Duink again. I guess it had to be them, since as far as the main story is concerned, they're the only Legend of Mana characters you've met. And that's basically it until Chapter 3 of Season 2, Wandering Bonds. Season 2 mostly involves having to rescue Echoes characters who all got sent into different continuities. A pretty cool instance of this was Duffel getting sent to Adventures of Mana, but disruptions between the universes actually created a crossover between Adventures and Sword of Mana. Which, for those of you that don't know, Sword of Mana was a reimagining of the first Seiken Densetsu, while Adventures of Mana was a more faithful remake. So these two games are basically the same, but also aren't. So yeah, Chapter 3 involves heading to Fadiel and exploring the underworld to find the Wolfman Blanchet. So naturally, Lark and Sierra are here too. It's a pretty good story, and even explores a bit of lore as to why and how Lark became Draconis' Dragoon in the first place. Like I mentioned, we get to see Rubens and Esmeralda while we're here, and it all ends with us being introduced to one of the main Season 2 villains, Gossamer, who, not gonna lie, I can't take seriously, because 1, his name is Gossamer, and 2, he basically eats the elementals and gets, like, Kirby powers from them. And honestly, that's about it. There really wasn't a lot of legend content in the main story. But the events are where we really get to have some fun. The first Legend of Mana related event, Searching for Lost Luster, came out on May 31st, 2022, and was once again kind of a retelling of The Lost Princess, but with more of an Echoes flair. Quilta encounters Elazul and agrees to help him find Pearl. The two team up with Hawkeye from Trials of Mana, and there's even a nice moment reminiscent of Elazul threatening Rachel as he tries to get information in town. Wanderer from Children of Mana points them toward the Makiv Caverns, where they find not Pearl, but Lady Black Pearl. Their brief skirmish awakens the Dew Ink, so we fight it off. We do escape the crumbling cavern, and Black Pearl and Elazul go their separate ways. It's not the most exciting event, but it is a pretty good first one. There's also a specific memory gem attached to this one called Show of Faith, which has Quilta, Elazul, and Black Pearl in the cavern together. Now, Echoes of Mana also had this recurring side event called Bravers Arise, that was basically a boss fight where you fought stronger and stronger versions of one boss to try and get high scores and claim rewards. I'm only going to focus on the Legend of Mana ones, but I'll mention them as they came up. Bravers Arise 2 launched on June 20th, 2022, and had players fighting one of Sandra's iconic jewel beasts. What's kind of interesting about this is the color palette in Echoes of Mana does not match any of the 4 jewel beasts that we fought in Legend. Could this perhaps be Jewel Beast 5? And then to celebrate Legend of Mana's anniversary on July 15th, 2022, they gave us a Dead Bear sticker. I think that was basically it. The next Legend of Mana centered event was on July 31st, 2022, and was called Labyrinth of Lost Heroes. And this one was an SCAD event, so naturally it involved SCAD being a hot-headed jerk that nobody likes. We did get to see a bit of him in the underworld interacting with Olbon, which was nice, and then fairies sent him to a labyrinth where he meets up with Duffel and Quilta. Eventually, Duran and Sumo show up in special night outfits, and then they all argue a lot. SCAD bees SCAD, and they fight a Minotaur, and SCAD discovers the true strength was the friendship he made along the way. There was a memory gem associated with this one called Fearsome Foursome that features SCAD, Duffel, Sumo, and Duran posing like it's a Queen album cover. For some reason, I found I didn't have this memory gem. I don't know why, since I clearly did the event. There are a couple of others like this, but I'm still going to be sure to talk about them. A little bit later, on August 19th, Bravers Arise 4 launched, and players could fight the Gorgon Eye from the Legend of Mana event, the Gorgon Eye. Alright, now compared to the first two, this next event is a great one. On August 31st, 2022, we got to play through Captain Shiloh's Swashbucklers. The story opens with Shiloh fishing to try and get food for Valerie and the baby penguin living in his house, which is a great nod to Legend of Mana, and he's eventually recruited by the pirate penguins, who are in desperate need of a new captain because Captain Tusk went on vacation. I love that. Aside from Quilta tagging along, we're also joined by Amanda, Roxas, and Reese. Everyone except Quilta gets a fun and event-exclusive pirate costume, so this is basically Captain Shiloh and his crew of pirate hotties. God, I love Amanda. I just want to take a moment to say that. Amanda is such a babe. We also get to see the pirate penguins David from the Summer Lovin' Quest and Ram Tiger, the ship's helmsman. Helms penguin. They all follow a treasure map that leads to a ghost ship and awaken the fire ghost genie thing, Gova, before defeating it and setting sail for their next adventure. Which, I guess, technically never happens, but this was a fun event. And yes, there's a memory gem called Ahoy Shiloh Squad that features Captain Shiloh and his aforementioned pirate hotties. In late September to mid-October, they did a couple of login events to celebrate the release of the Legend of Mana anime, The Teardrop Crystal. These were mostly just free summon tickets and whatnot, and they didn't really have any specific event stuff around this time. But this next arc is a special one, and I feel like I need to give a bit of background information to explain why. This is the one I kept saying I'm excited to talk about later. So, this was a 2-part event called the Siren Arc, and featured the events Flora and Fugue on September 30th, and Bone and Brimstone on October 14th. These were events that centered heavily on Ellie the Siren and Flumshy the Mermaid, and what's so incredibly amazing about these events is the story is actually based on content that was cut from the original Legend of Mana. I know it's easy to write off gacha mobile game story beats as just non-canon filler, but I think it's so cool that they used this opportunity to finally tell this story and expand on the Legend of Mana lore. Sure, admittedly, it would have been even cooler if they'd found a way to put these stories into the Legend of Mana remaster from a couple years ago, but hey, this is still something. So, Flora and Fugue actually opens with Pokiel, one of the Wisdoms, setting the scene and bringing people up to speed on who these characters are in case you're unfamiliar with them. There's even a nice Legend of Mana-esque event title fade-in. The story goes that Ellie and Flamshi are talking about life, and Ellie says that she sold her voice to a witch so she can't sink ships anymore. Unfortunately, since she can't sing, her wings are starting to atrophy. Flamshi heads off to the Figue snowfields to pick an icicle flower that may be able to cure her. This is super cool, because the Garden of Icicle Flowers is a real location in Legend of Mana that is never actually used for anything, so it makes sense that it was created for this cut content. Flamshi even talks with Crystal, the Ice Fairy, and they even expand upon the Jumi lore some, discussing a knight named Krylios who had a cryolite core, until it shattered and the shards grew into this garden. Flamshi brings the flower back to Ellie, and then they hug each other. Yaw. However, Ellie still needs songs to survive, so they hatch a plan to go recruit a muse. Flamshi heads back to Polpata, where the pirate penguins kidnap Gilbert, so they can use his singing as bait to lure in a sea creature. And that means you have to fight this eel queen that presumably would have been a boss battle in Legend of Mana, so we are basically getting a brand new boss design here. Flamshi rescues Gilbert and brings him back to sing for Ellie, and then in true Legend of Mana fashion, we get an event end card for Flora and Fugue. Now, this would have been a perfectly fine event on its own, but remember what I said, this is a two-part arc, and so that means next we have Bone and Brimstone. Flamshi buys flowers in Polpata Harbor and winds up chatting with a shadow. Flamshi, hot-tempered as she is, gets into a fight with Ellie, who dared suggest that Flamshi give the flowers to the supposed ghost wandering Polpata instead of her. While muttering to herself at the beach, Flamshi encounters Tona, a ghostly knight who tries to kidnap her for his lord, the Deathbringer. Flamshi allows herself to be captured when she feels Ellie might be in danger. Ellie then heads to the Academy of Magic in Geo, where we learn that Miss Theseus was the witch Ellie sold her voice to. She reveals that Deathbringer requires a mermaid because when brought far enough away from water, the magic within Flamshi will create a powerful fire that can exterminate anything, including souls and memories. Deathbringer seeks to use this flame to finally end his eternal purgatory of living death. As Ellie and Theseus arrive at Deathbringer's fortress, Flamshi bursts into flames and becomes the Anima Sola. But unfortunately for Deathbringer, his suffering does not end. So we kick his butt. We also learn that Deathbringer was Theseus' husband, which actually makes her role in the Legend of Mana event The Field Trip, where they were gathering potion ingredients outside the Bone Fortress, where we fight Deathbringer, a lot more interesting. Ellie wishes to save Flamshi, but the flames can only be quenched if she is embraced by the one she holds dearest. And that obviously couldn't be Ellie, right? But let's try it. Ellie catches fire, and the two strike a deal with Theseus to extinguish the final remnants of flames, and all they must give in return is Flamshi's mermaid tail, Ellie's siren wings, and their bond, their memories and feelings for one another. The two accept, saying that they will always find a way back to one another, and Pokiel ends the story saying that they are now human, and one human girl wishes to give flowers to a beautiful songstress who has become famous in Domina. And with that, Bone and Brimstone ends. I know I went into a lot more detail on these ones, but the fact that we don't see Quilta here or characters from the other games really hammers home that, yeah, this is, for all intents and purposes, a missing story arc from Legend of Mana. And with Echoes of Mana shut down, I guess I just really wanted to try and preserve this tale as best I could. I guess presumably you wouldn't have been able to recruit Ellie as a party member in the main game after finishing this if it had been in the story, but I really liked this arc. Also, if there was any doubt in your mind, I do think these two events answer a very important question about Ellie and Flamshi.
Yeah, they were gay.
Alright, but let's get back on track with the Echoes of Mana events. On November 30th, 2022, we had Secret of Santa, which isn't specifically a Legend of Mana event, but it does connect enough that I want to at least cover part of it. Popoi from Secret of Mana introduces Quilta and Honeycomb to just actual, real Santa, who, to be fair, was in Secret of Mana, and Santa asks us to help deliver presents to some of the other Echoes. Honeycomb becomes a Santa and heads off to worlds that I didn't bother recording footage for, and eventually Fadiel, where Shiloh, Cap and Tusk, a pirate penguin, Elazul, and Pearl are all just hanging out in Domina together. Shiloh is trying to figure out what perfect gift he can get for Bud and Lisa, but Santa Honeycomb gives Cap and Tusk a treasure map, he gives Pearl some flowers, and he gives Elazul a brand new sword. Shiloh politely declines a magic perfect present for the twins, claiming he wants to think of a gift by himself. Merry Christmas! Skip ahead, and we have to fight a rampaging Santa Claus, and also the Scorpion boss is here, and I'm only mentioning her because she's a total hottie, and I don't know where else I'll ever get to mention that. And you'd think that'd be it, but no, they managed to slip in one more Legend of Mana related event this year. On December 31st, 2022, we got to play Pavlov's Pursuit. Serafina is out in the orchard harvesting crops when Quilta decides to drop in. The two become friends and harvest orca plants together, and that's important for later. Later is now, and we also meet up with Sumo, who says that Fuji has gone missing, and Prim and Duran, who can't seem to find Flamey anywhere. Pavlov, the golem from Legend of Mana with aspirations of world domination, stumbled upon ancient texts at the junkyard, claiming that good luck will come to those with Fuji, a hawk, and an eggplant at the dawn of the new year. Pavlov believes this super lucky power will allow him to take over the world with his unstoppable army of Rabbites. After all, 2023 is the year of the Rabbite. The gang is overpowered, but fortunately do manage to get their hands on Pavlov's ancient texts, which is actually just a book of Japanese New Year's activities written by Madame Meme, the fortune teller of Domina. They discover instructions for special garb that can... You know what? Yeah, you know where this is going. Everybody gets super awesome Japanese New Year's costumes. Most notably, Serafina, who just looks too darn cute for words. The group defeats Pavlov and stops his current quest for world domination through the power of Japan and bask in the glow of the sunrise for a glorious and prosperous new year. Well, it turned out to not be such a great year for Echoes of Mana, but hey, whatever. Oh yeah, and there was a memory gem that, once again, I don't have for some reason. It was called Passage of Rights, and just had everybody in their fun New Year's garb playing with Karuta cards and kendamas. It's cute. The first Legend of Mana event of 2023 launched on January 20th, and was Bravers Arise 9, where players could fight the Lord of Jewels 999. I'm not sure why I used Elazul in the footage for this, when you'd think after that with one left memory gem, I'd have used Black Pearl. I mean, I had her, it's not like I couldn't have. Alright, and I know this has been a long video, but I promise we are almost done. They really did save one of the best and craziest events for last, because on January 31st, 2023, we got Mist Match Mayhem. This is a very unique event because this introduced the world of the Legend of Mana manga to this game. Yeah, Toto and Emu, the protagonists from the manga, are canonical characters now. I want you to think about how nuts that is. This would be like if we got a brand new Persona game where Ren Amamiya met Akira Kurosu. For those of you that never read the Legend of Mana manga, it was a much crazier comedic story. Toto was not the stoic hero from the game. He was a massive nerd who had the hots for Quistis from Final Fantasy VIII. I still need to do a video on this manga one day. So, Toto winds up in the world of Echoes of Mana because in his world he was helping Escad dig a toilet in the ground, which he fell into and traveled through dimensions. People mistook Toto for Shiloh, including Lady Black Pearl, who was furious with Shiloh because Toto tried to smooch her. In his defense, in his world, Black Pearl has a big old crush on him. This whole event reminds me a lot of the Seeing Double quest from Legend of Mana, except instead of an evil doppelganger, Toto is just a massive dork, and I mean massive. There's a lengthy scene of him educating Bud and Lisa on anime and figurines. And I'm not gonna lie, seeing Legend of Mana characters talking about DVDs feels really weird, because I never saw TV in this world. Serafina also meets her counterpart, Emu, who is much snarkier and has really funny facial expressions in this game. I loved this. She traveled to this world to get her brother, Toto, but they can't leave until they recover Toto's treasure. which, much like in the Legend of Mana event, Daddy's Broom, Lil Cactus threw away. Except instead of tossing it in the junkyard, we go back to Makiv Caverns, because the developers don't need to design new maps for that. They team up with Elazil along the way and rescue Lil Cactus from Duink, who, yes, we have fought multiple times by now. But thankfully, we do recover Toto's treasure, which is not, as Emu assumed, the Mana Sword, but is actually a real-life figurine of Reese from Trials of Mana that actually came out last year, and that Toto goes into a surprising amount of detail to try and sell us on. While sadly Toto and Emu weren't actually recruitable characters, because that would have been awesome even if we would have only had them for a few months, this event had quite a few memory gems, 3 of which were drawn by Shiro Amano, who was the mangaka on the Legend of Mana manga, and supervised the story for this event. There's Home of Their Own, which shows Toto, Emu, Bud, and Lisa all relaxing and playing with some of the iconic artifacts of the game, and then special artwork of the 2 protagonists, with Carefree Traveler Toto and Brother's Keeper Emu. Amano didn't draw this one, but there was also Melded Blades Unmatched, which again, I didn't have this one, and I can't remember why I didn't get it, but I do really like it. It's a good piece of Shiloh and Toto together. And then, yeah, they must have realized they weren't going to be able to do much to top that one, because while Missed Match Mayhem was going on, that was when we got the announcement that the app was going to be shutting down. They rushed out the remaining story chapters of Season 2 and gave out a bunch of free spirit crystals for summoning to players who wanted to try and get the most out of the game in the final months, but like I said, as of yesterday, the game is officially gone, and I doubt we'll ever see it again. Which is why I wanted to make this video. Sure, Echoes of Mana was just a freemium gacha game, but in that 1 year, there were so many amazing connections to my favorite video game of all time. I loved recruiting Legend of Mana units. I loved seeing fun, non-canon events like Captain Shiloh, real cut content brought to life like the Siren arc, and an amazingly hilarious manga crossover. I started recording any and all Legend of Mana footage that I could for this game early on because I knew I eventually wanted to make a video talking about Legend content in Echoes. I just admittedly wasn't expecting it to be so soon, and I definitely wasn't expecting it to be because the game had been shut down. But hopefully you all enjoyed this video and got a kick out of seeing some of this content for yourself. I definitely didn't think I had this much to say on the subject, but I'm glad I got it all out there, and it felt good to talk about Legend of Mana again. I'm sure I'll be back eventually to talk about, like, the manga or the anime series at some point. I do think I managed to cover everything from Legend that was in Echoes, but if there was something that I left out, feel free to let me know in the comments below, or let me know if you played Echoes of Mana at all. Who was your favorite unit? Were there any characters you were hoping to see? Let me know all that fun stuff in the comments, and for now, I think there's really only one thing left to do to say farewell to Echoes of Mana. Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, be sure to click like, but if you really liked it, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Extra special thanks to all my friends and loved ones over on Patreon, which you can pledge to today to see your own name in these ending credits. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care.